I'd like to call to order this secret conclave of America's media empires. We're here to come up with the next phony baloney crisis to put Americans back where they belong, in dark rooms glued to their televisions, too terrified to skip the commercials.
Well, I think...
NBC, you are here to listen and not speak. I think we should go with a good old-fashioned public health scare.
A new disease. No one's immune. It's like the summer of the shark, except instead of a shark, it's an epidemic. And instead of summer, it's all the time.
That is smoking.
Now, I hate to be the guy who derails what everybody else loves.
He loves being that guy.
But, Janice, we do have standards. This can't be a made-up disease. The only moral thing to do is release a deadly virus into the general public.
God, I love that. That's an old Simpsons clip. They predicted the predicament we're in today. Welcome to the Robb Show, the future #1 podcast in America. I'm joined today by my son, Tanner.
Hello. How are we doing?
Tanner is the one who put this all together. He encouraged me to start a podcast, primarily, I think, because he got tired of hearing me explain what was going on in the world and wanted it to get out to a larger audience. He has moved cross-country, set up a studio, bought all the equipment, got all this baby lined up. We are now in episode 3, and as of today, I am fascinated by how well we're doing. I would have never have guessed.
From the numbers, it looks like it's about a 13-1 growth.
Is it 13-1 now?
I think so.
About a 13-1 spread. What he's talking about is we sent this out to a very small audience and wanted to see how it would spread. So, meaning if I send it to one person, that means 13 additional people listen to it per one person we sent it to, which, as I understand it, just through the analytics, that is crazy good, and we're really excited about it. So my guess is that people are looking for information. They want some validation on their thought process because they feel something is very strange going on, and they want they just want perspective on it. And because I am a complete lunatic when it comes to information, like I said before, 24 hours a day, I never stop. Now that I have social media, it's to the point of crisis in my own home. I am locked on it. Morning, noon, night, and when I go to sleep. So what I want to get to today, and this seems to be the biggest topic that everybody wants to talk about, is this COVID-19. I believe it is nothing more than a cold virus, and they are manipulating data to scare the absolute hell out of everybody they possibly can. I think the whole series of events around COVID-19 are very questionable. I want to say bullshit because they are, but a lot of people just don't want to give in yet. They just cannot believe that their government would pull such a hoax on them. But I would ask you, was Russia a hoax? Have we figured out that yet? Did you get to watch the Honorable Bob Mueller? Was that a hoax? What about impeachment with Colonel Vindman? Was that a hoax? That group of characters, Adam Schiff and the whole thing. It was obviously a bunch of crap. And now that it is exposed for a bunch of crap, now we're on to the next one, which is COVID-19. So as I was preparing for the show, I kept thinking, I saw a clip years ago. A Russian agent, a Soviet agent, was describing how ideological subversion, brainwashing, was implemented through Marxist tactics onto the United States and what they were trying to do to us. And it just dawned on me that that's exactly what we're going through. So I'm going to play you just a really quick clip. Let me tell you who this guy is. His name is Yuri Bezmenov. He escaped from the Soviet Union in 1970 to come to the United States. This is an interview from 1984. Check out this guy. This guy was worked for the Soviet press agency called Novosti. So he was in communications, which was nothing more than a front group for the KGB. Play it, Tanner.
What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions.
He's explaining that in a 4-stage process: demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and then normalization. And it just feels like we're right in the middle of this movie, and nothing is stopping the movie from going forward.
In theaters now.
In theaters now. COVID-19 in theaters now. And that's all it is. It's a movie script. You can tell by the way you go about it every day. If you're not paying attention, or you want to believe it, or you're predisposed to not question anything, obviously this is going to work, and you are going to, no matter what I tell you or what you see or any amount of analytical evidence or bullshit that you know you can prove wrong, you're going to stick with it. You're going to wear the mask. You're going to stay at home. You're going to fall in line with all of this nonsense. And I just wish you would. And I wish you'd just say, hang on a minute. Let me think through this for just a minute, and let's find out whether I am being played for a fool during an election year because we're in a power struggle, and or Can I get out of this funk that I'm in and realize that I better start fighting for my country, or the enemies of it are going to suck you right on in? So he says demoralization. And I say demoralization started in 2001 with the bombing of the World Trade Centers, or the flights going into the World Trade Centers, and has just exacerbated since then. Donald Trump came in, cut taxes, put a bunch of policies in place that made a lot of common sense to a lot of people, but was met with insane kickback, pushback, violent pushback. A lot to do with Donald Trump's personality. I'll give you that. He is one of those guys that is a typical Queens character. If you've ever been to Queens, I have many times. They have a chip on their shoulder kind of people. They're right outside of Manhattan. And the Queens personality is bring it. If you want some, I'm here for you. And that's Donald Trump. But I try to look past that. All my mom used to tell me was, when I was a kid, is you never get stuck on the personality. You always pay attention to the person. And what she meant by that was you can get misled by personalities. They can be charming, they can be cute, they can be whatever, but they can lead you astray. And we've all been led astray by a great personality, right? But what she was trying to say is you look at the person, you look at their life, how they handle their business. Are they respectful? Are they loyal? Are they decent? And you look through Donald Trump's life, and you can make all kinds of arguments that he is a bad dude. But you got to consider the source, and you got to remember that the people that are beating him up every day are nothing more than the propaganda wing of the United States government. Nothing more. The United States press, whether you believe it or not, I'm 100% positive. I don't have to guess anymore. I've watched it for years and years and years with a very astute eye. The press in the United States is a corporate version, a well-scripted media conglomerate, media arm of the political establishment. That's all it is. And to get caught up in it, or to believe that these people are selling you the truth, they're not. So he goes through the demoralization process. Then he says destabilization, which I think we've just witnessed the destabilization process as two well-funded groups on both sides by a cat named George Soros, who has a group called the Open Societies Foundation. But they use all these front groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center. There's a ton of them. And they filter in money, and they get these gangs, these paramilitary gangs on each side, whether it be Black Lives Matter or Antifa, and they are there to cause complete and total chaos. And they create that chaos in cities where the governments are aligned. So they do it in Seattle, where they got this crazy governor, crazy mayor, and they just tear up Seattle, take out 6 blocks of space and make it their own, as if you can just go into wherever you want, take over whatever you want, and the government goes, oh, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. It's insanity. But Black Lives Matter and Antifa are groups that are there to cause visual panic that you can watch on your TV. They want to show the screaming and the fighting and the racial hatred. They are marketing racial hatred as hard as they can right now. But COVID-19, that's the big one. Because I don't think this country will fall down racial lines. I think we get along too well. I think trying to get Black America and white America to hate each other, it's just not going to work. You're going to get fringe groups that are nuts, but I just think the core of the country has been established, and we like each other. We might not like every single white or black person, but we like each other, and we're not going to war with one another. You can bet on that. So the COVID is their ace in the hole. Anyway, he's got 4 Marxist tactics to take over your society: demoralization, destabilization, crisis, which is a violent reaction from 2 political parties onto each other, and then whoever wins creates normalization. I think the side trying to overtake the country right now would like the new normal to be masks whenever they say they want you to wear them. If they want you to wear a dunce cap around town, you'll wear a dunce cap around town. They will tell you what to do, and you will walk in lockstep. Society will demand that you walk in lockstep with them. And if you do anything different, you'll be shamed. Because right now, look at it. If you don't wear these masks, you're the bad guy, right? Because the mask isn't about protecting you. It's about protecting someone else. Well, how do you lose that argument? I mean, that's kind of putting people in a box. I think the mask is a demoralization tactic, and I have asthma, and I don't like wearing it, and it makes me sick. What about me? It's nonsense. But the new normal would be masks, isolation, an expansion of the coordination between big business, big corporate business, big global corporate businesses, and the United States government. And your small business, your little hardware store, All your little stores are going bye-bye. The big businesses will suck those babies right up, and you will be wondering, who was I rooting for? Because I got the short end of the stick here. That's the other side. That's what they want to do. They want to do typical socialism. Government aligned with business. Small business goes away. Big business gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's exactly what you're seeing. That's why the stock market's at 25, 26,000, and nobody's even working. And the stock market's going up. Big business. It's a big club, as George Carlin used to say, and you ain't in it. So, are you starting to see how the 2-week lockdown is becoming never-ending? Remember when it was a 2-week lockdown? Huh? That didn't give you cause to think, I might be in something over my head here. This might be more than I bargained for. I didn't think it was going to be 4 months, and now it's indefinite. Now it's they'll tell you to wear a mask if they want to. Whichever state, whichever local municipality wants you to wear a mask to go into a business, or if you have to wear it outside or wherever they want you to wear it, you now have to wear a mask. I think it's crazy. I don't understand it. But let's get into how this whole thing began. I want to dissect COVID-19, the movie, playing in theaters near you. Let's talk about how they did this. Let's talk about the rollout. I always talk about the rollout because you could tell a propaganda campaign was heading our direction when Chinese propaganda started to hit social media and the networks. And there were several different forms of the propaganda, but the one that stuck out the most to me, or the two that stuck out the most to me, were the Chinese in hazmat suits spraying streets as though they were trying to kill the virus with some magical solution was going to kill the virus, right? And as I tell everyone, and my friends that have been to China, you know, that is a massive society. Spraying the streets is just, it is such a propaganda ploy, has no basis in reality whatsoever. And if you remember, there were people dying in the streets. They were showing people just dying in the streets from COVID. Well, that didn't happen here. So something's up. Right off the bat, you know, something's up. Then they kept showing the pictures of a dead bat on the side of a bowl of broth, a bowl of soup. And again, they're pushing, okay, this bat is what's going, the Chinese folks that are in these wet markets, they're eating bat soup. That's where the virus spread from bats to humans, and now it's a human transfer. That was the game plan, and that was how they sold it. And then once that didn't make any sense to you anymore, they moved on to something else, shaded the truth, and you never thought any more about it. But that was the beginning. And then how did they get the freak out going in America? Well, they started seeding this cold virus, which clearly is either completely manipulated or has an effect on the elderly, people with comorbidities, people that are sick to begin with. Outside of that, if you're 40 years old or 35 years old, you have a better chance of getting struck by lightning twice today, and there's not a cloud in the sky, and it's about 110 degrees outside. It just doesn't happen. It is so rare and so ridiculous that it's nothing to even think about. What this country should be doing is making sure they take care of their elderly, make sure that we protect vulnerable people, but not shut down the entire country. And I mean, people are just so into this. It's like they want to be miserable. Let's shut everything down. You can't go to the beaches. You can't go to the 4th of July. You can't do anything because of COVID. But when you look inside the data, it doesn't make any sense. But how did they roll it out? They started to seed it in Italy. And anybody that's been to northern Italy knows that that is a retirement community. All of northern Italy is on top of each other, very easy to spread into any disease. The Chinese were going back and forth between Wuhan and cities in China because they have bought all of the major Italian brand names, and they go back and forth between northern Italy and China all the time. So it was easy to spread this baby, right? So they get into Italy, and then you start to see the propaganda coming out of Italy. And I thought Italy was our ally, and maybe they are. But clearly they were starting to put out some obvious propaganda. And you might remember where they have the medical trucks and military trucks coming down the street, one after another, supposedly carrying dead bodies, and the mass panic begins. When you see stuff like that, that's intentionally trying to scare you. They wouldn't show you that if they weren't trying to scare you to death. So the propaganda was coming out of Italy too, and then all of a sudden the numbers started popping in. And we got a 5% death rate, and oh my God, 5% of 320 million people. How many people in the States are going to die? And they scared you to hell with the Italy campaign. That was plan B. And then we get it in to the United States. And if you remember, I don't know how many people remember, but Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, health officials in New York, Fauci, were all saying in February that there was very little to worry about. The World Health Organization put out a statement that China said it was not transferring from human to human in the middle of, in January, at the end of January, I believe it was. So in February, nobody's really concerned about this thing. And then all of a sudden they started to ramp it up. And then all of a sudden every show was talking about it with Trump is out on the campaign trail at his rally saying we got 13, 14, 15 people with it. Doesn't look like that's going to be a big deal. And I got to think that Donald Trump doesn't believe that he's a scientist, doesn't believe that he is a doctor. So this information is coming from the same guy that you can watch give interviews, Fauci, saying that there's nothing to worry about. We have nothing to be concerned with as it's spreading and as it's being seeded in the United States. Not that it's meant to be a big, deadly virus, but that was the plan, was to seed it in the United States, seed it in Europe, and make a world spectacle out of it and say that everybody was dying and everybody had to lock down. And the question is, what's the lockdown all about? What are we all locked down for? What's the reasoning? Outside of just trying to destroy Donald Trump and win this election, I can't figure out what the rest of the world is doing. I got to think that, like I've said before, Donald Trump might be the fly in the ointment. So the result of this not paying attention to it and kind of downplaying this COVID-19, all of a sudden in the beginnings of March, according to Donald Trump, according to Fauci and his team comes into Donald Trump, says we got to shut it all down. Got to shut down the entire country. And as I explained before, there's a lot of forces in the scientific community, in the universities. There's a lot of forces that go against the United States' best interest. They just are. They're embedded here. They're paid off. They have other interests. I believe Fauci is one of those characters because he changes his story. It just depends on what channel you're on, what story you're going to get from him. He's not consistent with anything, which is a sign of a full of shit person, which is all he is. But people love him. He's America's grandpa. Isn't he cute? But he shut down the entire country, or had Trump shut down the entire country. And the series of events after that was we got shut down. Nobody could leave their house. We were locked in place for a little bit. Our hair grown. We can't get a haircut. We can't get toilet paper at the store. We're starting to, people are starting to go, what's going on here? Getting a little bit nervous. All of a sudden, jobs are starting to go away. We're losing millions and millions of jobs coming off the best economy in world history for 3+ years. And then all of a sudden, bam, this comes in and we shut everything down, shut the world down. Part 2 of that is we go through the CARES Act. That's meant to calm everybody down. We're going to give you a nice fat check. If you got a business, we're going to pay for it while we're in this little bit of a shutdown. If you're out of work, we're going to give you some unemployment insurance. It's going to be more than you were making in the first place. Everything's going to be fine. You're going to get your big checks. You're going to be happy. You're not going to have to work. You're going to be laying around the house, getting the suntan. Now we're July. July's tomorrow. What's today? June 30th, Tanner? What do we got today?
Yep, last day.
Last day. June 30th. And here we're still going at it. And governors and local mayors and so forth are beginning the mask and shut it down again. We were supposed to do the 1, 2, 3, 4 phase. Now the data manipulation comes in and we're not getting free. It's going to be a shutdown pretty much indefinitely, at least until the election, maybe a little bit after that. So they built it up into this mythological virus. It's the worst virus ever. Even Donald Trump said it's the worst virus since 1917, 1918. It is just devastating to the American people. All of the hospitals had to stop elective surgeries. That's where they make their money. They've starved the hospitals. And then here's where the next part of the plan comes into place. And that is data manipulation. Data manipulation. That's what's going on now, and that's what will go on until we stop it. Until the American people just said, I'm not going to deal with it anymore. Take the mask off, and they open up their business and say, come bring it. I'm not buying it anymore. If you want to come to my store in a mask, come on. But I'm opening it up, and I'm getting back to work. And until we do that, this is the way it's going to be. So it might be this way for as long. Who knows? I don't know. How long is it going to go, Tanner?
It's
Give me a guess.
Normal.
It's the new normal. And I love the rollout of what's coming after this, right? You can't move or you can't do anything until you get the vaccine or the drugs that the CDC approves. So that's where we're headed now. That's kind of what stage we're in. Do we have Dr. Fauci? Listen to Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci is the vaccine king, if you don't know who he is. So
Darth Fauci.
Darth Fauci, not too long ago, within the last, I don't even want to guess how long it was, but now the CDC and people within the CDC can patent vaccines. So they can patent vaccines. They can have vaccine makers coordinate with them to make vaccines to shoot into your body. And with this coronavirus, if you just think how illogical it is, we're at about a 99.6% survival rate with this thing, but they want to put the vaccine in 100% of people. The average age of death is 80 plus, and they want to put a vaccine into people with no choice. I was talking to a buddy of mine in England not too long ago, and he said that their system is about ready. And when they get the vaccine, they can't travel without the vaccine. Nobody can travel into their country unless they've been vaccinated. So you can kind of see where this is headed, but there's money to be made off of this pandemic. From Bill Gates, from Fauci, from Birx, from this whole cast of characters that are in the drug and vaccine business. And I wonder how many people understand that the drug business is liable. If you get a drug into through the FDA and into the American system, and that drug has harmful effects, it starts to cause cancer, it starts to cause heart disease, and you didn't identify that up front, the people that were affected by it can sue you. Not vaccines. And you wonder why they're pushing that vaccine so hard. There's not one person out there that can tell me that it makes any sense that with a 99.6 recovery rate that 100% of the people have to take a vaccine. I don't want the vaccine. I would rather die. I have asthma. I'm supposedly one of these high-risk people. I'm not worried about it at all because I know it's nonsense. I walk around, I touch everything. I touch my face, I touch my hands. I walk around barefoot just to irritate people. No masks. Unless they absolutely make me wear a mask, I will not wear one. Right? But there's a lot of money to be made, and Dr. Fauci is on the head of that. So is Bill Gates. So is Melinda Gates. They're all involved in vaccinations because that's where the big money is at, and you are not liable for any illnesses or any cancers or anything from vaccinations. Once it gets on the schedule and the United States says you have to take a vaccination or you have to take it before you go to school, that's the deal. That's the end. And they mass produce them and they stick them into your arm, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, you have no choice anymore. And when people lie to me every day and I see them lie and lie and lie for years and years and years and years, I don't want them sticking a needle in my arm unless I give them the authorization to do it. I don't trust it. I don't know why anybody trusts it. So you got the vaccines coming. You've got the contact tracers coming. That's the new one. So if you've had it, then they want to trace everywhere you've been. That's interesting. That's not Big Brother working on you at all. Think of how they sold this thing too. Remember the everything you touch, the virus could sit on there for 9 hours, 10 hours, 2 days, 3 days, a week, a month. Nobody knew. It was they built up this mythological virus and they stuck with it. So then they went to solidify the con. That's where we're at now. Now we're in the solidification of the con job that is upon us. And I want to play real quick the masks, because the masks, you may or may not understand, the mask is just nothing more than a psychological operation. It's no more than that. If you think that mask helped you, fine, but why do I got to wear it? I'm not going to get near you. I'm not getting near you. You don't have to worry about me. But they've quarantined or made quarantines across all age groups, all people, whether you're 15 years old and you got about a 1 in gazillion chance of getting sick from COVID, you got to be quarantined if you have it. The whole thing is just a political ploy, and they're going to start selling these masks. Here comes Nancy Pelosi, Queen Nancy. Let me set it up for him, Tanner, because here's George Stephanopoulos. Again, this is how the media works. George Stephanopoulos is he was the former communication director of the Bill Clinton campaign, worked in the White House with him. He is closely aligned with the Clintons. He is closely aligned with the Democrat Party, and he runs the news division for ABC. So oddly enough, he's the one interviewing Queen Nancy. Tanner, play clip.
Is it time to mandate the wearing of masks across the country?
Oh, I definitely long overdue for that. And my understanding that the Centers for Disease Control has recommended the use of masks, but not required it because they don't want to offend the president.
Here it comes. You can start to see the coordination. They started slow. They float it. Within 2 or 3 weeks, all the Democrats, because Nancy is she's the kingpin. All the Democrats that get on all the shows, all your network shows, Fox, MSNBC, all these characters, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, they'll all be saying that it is immoral not to wear this mask and that you are a complete selfish jerk off if you don't wear the mask. That's where we're heading, if we're not already there, but that's where we're heading. They're going to start calling for mandated masks across the country, and every death is going to be Trump's fault because he's taking it too lightly. He's not mandating masks. He's not requiring it. And that is going to be the play moving forward on masks. Dr. Fauci, my favorite. Play Darth Fauci for me, Tanner. I want to hear what he had to say today about vaccines, because that's the creme de la creme. That's where the real action starts, with the vaccines.
Next, we have vaccines. As several have mentioned, it's extremely important to have safe and effective vaccines available for everyone in this country, as well as globally.
So I don't know if you got to hear all of that, but they are now making, and I think it's symbolic, they're making Fauci wear a mask of Darth Vader, which I think is interesting. But I think if you're going to wear a mask and you want to symbolize who you represent, I think representing the dark side, I think it's right that he wear this Darth Vader mask. Can you hear him one more time, Tanner? I want to play that one more time. And listen, you can hear the mask, him talking through the mask. Let me see if you can hear it one more time. I just love hearing it.
Next, we have vaccines. As several have mentioned, it's extremely important to have safe and effective vaccines available for everyone in this country, as well as globally.
Darth Fauci. I'm going to recap everything here, but think of where we come from. We went from bat soup in February to global vaccinations through the World Health Organization, Bill Gates, and the CDC within 6 months. I smell a con. Can you smell, Tanner? Can you smell it? Is that a con? Is that what I smell? It is a con job. So I want to go slow through it now, because I rattled off a lot of information, because every time I start talking about it, I go down 15 different roads and I sometimes confuse people. So I want to go through it really quick. You could see the propaganda con coming out of China. Obviously, anybody who knows China knows information does not get out of China unless China wants it out of China. So when it gets picked up by the news and social media and you're watching it on Twitter, it's because China allowed it out of their country, especially when it's Chinese information. Okay. So they gave you the propaganda out of China. They seeded it in Italy, especially northern Italy, a retirement home, so that it would spread very, very fast and cause chaos. In February, they're telling the United States that it's not that big a deal. Fauci's on programs and he's on multiple interviews saying there's nothing really to worry about. We've got this all under control. There's just no big deal. We have no cases. We're fine. In February, as thousands of people are going back and forth between Wuhan and the United States. So they seed it in China. They start it in China, seed it in Italy, seed it in the United States. Fauci comes in and tells the president of the United States they has to shut down the entire economy in an election year, right? And then here we go with the series of events from that point forward. They locked down for a couple weeks. I think most people realize when it was a couple weeks, that was just to get you not to get too freaked out. Then a couple more weeks and you're still not freaked out, because it's just 2 weeks at a time. When we get to May, we're going to be okay. Then May 15th, we weren't okay. June 15th, July, it's going on indefinitely, and just the way it was always planned, right? So you have the rollout of COVID-19, all of the traditional scare tactics with the media. Everybody's going to die. It is the magic virus. It sits on surfaces forever. Sun doesn't kill it. It spreads easily. It is the worst pandemic and the worst virus, the most deadly and the most contagious virus in 100 years. That's what they sold you. Some of you bought into it. Some of you questioned it. I questioned it from the get-go. It all seemed like bullshit for me from the very beginning. And I think at this point I'm proven to be right if anybody's really paying attention. So let's look through just the rest of the story. After Italy came the shutdown. Trump goes into panic mode with ventilators. The language starts to get caught up with PPE, with PPP loans, with social distancing. That's the language coming in. So you're getting used to the language. You're starting to get used to it. They're starting to move you, baby. Here we come, COVID-19. Let's dance. It's coming together. Here it is. And then they softened it a little bit because they said, okay, well, you're just going to get a little vacation. We're going to give you some money. Don't worry. We're going to go and get $6.2 trillion, and we're all going to be fine. It's only $6.2 trillion. I wonder how many people are sitting fat from that $6.2 trillion other than people aligned with our government. Because believe me, the people aligned with our government are doing just fine with that $6.2 trillion. Because that's how it rolls. They're thieves. And they come up with plots to get your money. And one of them was COVID. The big one was COVID. And then they started with the data manipulation. And I want to walk through the data manipulation because I think that's the biggest part. That's where the most people get, where they're just not really sure what's going on. 130,000 people have died. They want to cite that day after day. Millions of people are supposedly infected, and they want to scare you with that, and they're going to shove that down your throat day after day after day, right? So I want to compare and contrast. I was trying to make this easy to understand, but I want to show you how the construct of a ruse, of a con job is put together. And I want to compare and contrast H1N1, affectionately known as the swine flu, in 2009 and 2010 under the Barack Obama administration. And you remember that Fauci has been there since the 80s, so Fauci was in charge then, and he was interviewed back in those days as well. But the CDC said that, and you can look it up on the website right now, 61 million Americans were infected with H1N1, 61 million. And the death toll was 12,500. So what you have there is a very contagious virus that's very benign. That's what it was. I think it was a test run. But let's compare and contrast how this particular pandemic was spread in the United States. H1N1 versus COVID-19. So COVID-19, it took $6.2 trillion. They have a couple million people infected, not the 61 million Americans by the CDC's own website were infected with H1N1, the swine flu. The COVID-19 is 2 million, but the deaths are way higher. And why? Because H1N1, when you had it and you went to the hospital with heart disease and you tested positive for H1N1, if they even tested you, you weren't labeled as an H1N1 because they didn't have the death scoreboard up. They weren't trying to freak you out under the Barack Obama administration. They were basically trying to say, okay, we got a bad little thing here. If we gets out of control in any area, we'll be careful. But no major fear campaigns spread across the United States through politicians, pop culture, and the establishment. But COVID-19 is the exact opposite. COVID-19, if you die from a headache, from heart disease, from cancer, from a slip and fall, if you had COVID-19, you were listed as a COVID-19 death. That's a big difference. And I don't know why people aren't more upset about it and aren't questioning it more. Why not one question from the media? If you don't think the media is in the pocket of the establishment, if it's not the exact same thing, wouldn't one reporter get up there and say, Mr. Fauci, in 2010, 61 million people had H1N1. Can you tell us how they were labeled? Can you tell us how they were added up? How were deaths compiled in 2010? Not one person has done that. And it's all open. All the information's open. You can go look at it on the CDC website. And just think about it. I always say it's like gray hair. Because you go to the hospital and you have gray hair and you die from heart disease, they can say you died from gray hair, just like they can say you died from COVID. There's no track. There's no, at the beginning of this, there was no verification that you were dying from COVID-19. They just had to say they thought you had COVID-19. And that was explained explicitly by the Chicago health director. I believe I always say it was either Chicago or Illinois. I just happened to be watching it. And she said, if somebody has cancer, they have a couple weeks to live. They test positive for COVID-19. If they die, it's a COVID-19 death. If they're in the hospital at that time for cancer, it's a COVID-19 case. And that's the end of it. And Dr. Deborah Birx said the exact same thing. So why is the media not asking the question, why is H1N1 and COVID-19, why is there a stark difference in how the data is compiled? Because if I want to scare you half to death and I say that gray hair is a death sentence and you go to the hospital because your heart's hurting and you got 2 gray hairs in the back and you die, they could just say you died from gray hair. That's the way this thing is set up. It's such an obvious ruse, I can't get past it. And what bothers me the most, and Tanner, you will agree because I get so frustrated with it, why in the world do people not seem to care? When did it become that nobody cares about their country? Everybody's just going to take the line of bullshit. They all feel helpless. Like, what can you do? Well, what can you do is like anything else, civil disobedience. You're not wearing the mask. If I'm 85 years old and I have comorbidities, I'm going to be very, very careful. If I'm 35 years old and single and I want to get out to the bars and hang out with my friends and have a good time and enjoy life, who am I protecting? It's crazy. They have shut down the American way of life and everything that makes it wonderful under a guise, under a ruse. And you can tell that by the data manipulation. Can you imagine, and this is the last thing I'll say about the H1N1 comparison. Can you imagine if they had compiled the numbers with H1N1 in 2010 like they're doing right now today with COVID-19? Let's just think about it. If 61 million people were infected, 61 million people, and everybody that died who had that, they could test for that virus and had it in their blood, everybody who died from H1N1, you'd have had I've done the math for you, about 2.5, 3 million deaths. That's what it would have been. If you take the same percentage, it would have been 2 or 3 million deaths associated with H1N1, but instead it's on the website as 12,500 because that's probably more realistic. They know how to play cons. They know how to play games. And if you think that this Game of Thrones fight for power that's going on in the United States right now isn't real, you're just not paying attention because it's real. And it's coming. And I talk all the time with people and they just think that this is an infallible system. The United States is infallible. We got all the processes in place and this and that and the other. And if you think that money and power cannot disrupt, disturb, and retard a system, you're just not thinking very clearly because it's completely possible. Every society in human history has went through some kind of takeover at some point. It's just a matter of time. The greatest societies in the world have been taken over. Ours has only been around for a couple hundred years. Of course, ours is fallible. It's as I'm looking at it, doesn't seem to be that complicated. Seems like you put a bunch of money into these senators and these congressmen who are corrupt. You pad their pockets. You pad them financially. It runs like a mafia. If anybody knows anything about mafias or read mafia books, it runs just like a mafia. They can compromise you. They can buy you. But once you get into the club, whatever introduction you get to the club or whatever keeps you attached to it, these people don't leave the club. They're not leaving the club. And I always wonder if some of these mysterious deaths are because people did go against the club. You start to wonder sometimes what's really going on in the world. But I'll tell you this, if there's no other fact that leads you down the path to understanding that COVID-19 might be a real virus, it probably is, but it doesn't get you to think that there's obviously a coordinated effort to scare you half to death and to get you to sit in your home and lose your business. It's the way COVID-19 is calculated versus H1N1. That's it. You need to know nothing else. From that point forward, you should question every single solitary thing because had they calculated H1N1 the same way, they would have been and treated Barack Obama the same way, put up this death scoreboard and said everybody that has H1N1, it's coming down the pipe here, and everybody who has H1N1 who's in the hospital is an H1N1 case. Everybody who dies in the hospital, whether it be heart disease or cancer, but if they have H1N1, it was an H1N1 death, and they'd have put that up on the death scoreboard on CNN under the Barack Obama administration, would have had 2.5 to 3 million deaths. How scary is that? Don't you just feel dirty when you think your government's doing that to you? And all of the different people align, like Fauci and Birx and what's that guy's name, Redfield, all the politicians that are pushing it, like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi, Marco Rubio, all of these different cast of characters that are either dopey, it's possible. I don't think so, because it seems very, very coordinated, the rollout and the whole data manipulation, the CARES Act, the money, the whole thing seems very orchestrated because it is orchestrated. And here we are. We are a few months away from the election, and I think we're headed straight down the path, unless we stop it ourselves, of civil war. Because how's it going to stop? Is it going to be Nancy Pelosi? Is Nancy Pelosi going to stop this thing? How about Joe Biden? Is he going to... You're cracking me up. How about Chuck Schumer? Is he going to stop it? I don't think any... What about Fauci? Can Fauci stop it? I don't think Fauci wants to stop it. Schumer? Can Schumer stop it? Give me one more. These people are not going to stop it. They are rooting for it. I wish that they would have to wear pom-poms and a skirt on the Senate floor and root for COVID, because these Democrats root harder for COVID than anything I've ever seen. Not you voters. I'm a Democrat voter too. I voted for Obama in 2008, and I voted for Bill Clinton in 1996. I voted for Ross Perot in 1992. So I am an equal opportunity idiot when it comes to voting for these frauds. And I have on many occasions. But all I'm saying is, of right now, I've never seen a political party or a media or the establishment, the bureaucracy, just root day after day after day for these COVID cases to spike. And that's all they talk about. The COVID cases have spiked. It is relentless on Fox News. We were watching Fox News this morning, and every show is about cases spiking in Republican states. They're not being careful. They're trying to enjoy their lives. They're going to the beach. They're laying out in the sun. They're going to bars. They're trying to enjoy their life. We must stop that immediately. These are selfish Americans. They don't understand that this virus, if they catch it, has a 0.0000001% chance of making them sneeze. They don't understand it. They don't understand that grandpa, who's at 90, might get it if they get near him. How about you stay away from grandpa for a little bit till we figure it out? That wouldn't be so hard, because they're isolating you anyway. And I heard Tommy Lahren, she's this attractive blonde who comes on, and she's a conservative thought. She's young, but she makes I generally don't get into her rhetoric very, very much. But she said, if masks work, if they're so essential and they work, why can't we just open up everything and start wearing masks? What's the difference? She's got a really, really good point, because not only do they want you to wear the mask, they want you to be stuck and do nothing and have no activities, no sports, no weddings, no funerals, no gatherings, no life. It's a punishment for voting for Donald Trump. You're being punished. Don't you get it? How many times do I got to tell you? Tanner, how many times do I got to tell these people? I don't understand it. Huh?
I don't know.
Am I explaining it properly? Did I get is there anything you don't understand? Should I go back through anything, or did I sum this baby up pretty good?
I think you got it.
You think you got it?
Yeah.
Anything that I missed? Anything that you didn't understand?
No.
All right.
No.
We got one person down. He's a smart kid. He's got it figured out. And I'll tell you what, Civil War is...
But I have heard it quite a few times. So.
I've ran it through a couple times, haven't I? Pacing around the house. But I feel Civil War comes if we don't stop it ourselves. So here's the thing. The only hope, and I'm going to play a clip here at the very end. It's a long-winded commercial. I believe every word of what they say is actually happening. I think this commercial, this video, this propaganda piece comes from somebody attached with the Trump campaign. At the very end of it, it says Trump 2020, but it basically goes through the COVID hoax, the unusual death of George Floyd, goes through a bunch of different scenarios that don't make any sense, and says it's all orchestrated and planned by the enemies of America that are aligned with many people within the United States, whether it be the government or politicians or what have you, that there's an outside global force that is aligned with it. And I'll let you listen to that at the end. But if the people of the United States don't protest in mass, if that silent majority doesn't protest in mass, then you are looking at a stolen, contested election, one of the two. And just think about it. If you are a Donald Trump hater, are you going, and the media all the way up, because remember, the media is against Donald Trump, clearly. So if the media is telling you that Michigan is up 9 points and Wisconsin is up 6 points and North Carolina is up 4 and he's up 18 points overall because everybody wants Joe Biden to be their president, they just want to roll the dice and see what happens with a guy who can't think straight. They want to see what happens. If on election day it comes out that Donald Trump wins a squeaker, would you buy it? And by the same token, if you're a Donald Trump fan, Can you even fathom that even one person, even his son and his wife, would go to the polls for Joe Biden? It's fascinating to me. Joe Biden is not a sharp character. He's never been a sharp character. You can play clips of Joe Biden all the way back into the early 80s, late 70s, where he just says the most bizarre, baffling things. There's a clip that we'll play probably on the next show where he's going on and on about his education and how he finished in the top of his class and on and on and on and on. And it turns out none of it was true. He goes through a whole series of things, reciting his resume. And then the very end of the clip is the news anchor going, Joe Biden has apologized. He did not finish at the top of his class. Blah, 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 blah. It goes through the whole series. Just a complete made up lie when he was in front of a voter. And then they fact checked him. And sure enough, they still voted for him. Because there is no lie. I mean, when you are in the club, you can tell whatever lie you want. But Joe Biden, nobody on the Trump side is going to go for Biden if he gets elected. It is going to cause, because right now, if you're on that side of politics, if you're right now leaning on Donald Trump and thinking that he's going to save the country and he loses, those are the people with all the guns. Those are the people with all the guns that are sitting in their house going, let's see how this plays out. And if Joe Biden wins and they start telling you that mandates are coming from every which way and that they're going to raise your taxes and tear down the wall on the southern border and all of these things, there is going to be a pushback from the Trump campaign and the Trump people that is going to be biblical. Because I don't think anybody on the Trump side of the fence thinks that Joe Biden could possibly win. He's going to have to go through 3 debates. He can't even do canned. He did me and my son were watching today a press conference in quotations that he did.
Yeah, if you want to call it that.
It's hilarious. He knows everybody that he's going to call on. All of the answers that he's supposed to have are in front of him. All of the questions are in front of him. All the questions are dopey and ridiculous. Anybody who's been in journalism school that thinks that you haven't had a guy give a press conference, he's running for president, he's been hiding in his basement, hasn't given a press conference in 89 days, and he comes up and they go, "Hi, Joe. I'm so-and-so with ABC News, and I would like to know if you like the red mask better than the black mask, and if you think we should wear the black mask outside or only inside. What do you think, Joe?" These are the kind of questions they ask this poor guy. And he can't answer those. He can't answer the most simple of questions. Joe, what is today? He has to look down on his scorecard to find out what the day is. He doesn't know anything. And he is steps away from the presidency, according to CNN. He's got a 14-point lead. I don't think he has 14 voters, but that's just me. This is not a commercial for Donald Trump. I've been rooting for Donald Trump. I was on his campaign. I got to come with full disclosure, but there's nothing in my mind that could convince me that the country doesn't fall apart at the seams if Joe Biden is the president. So I think when people get sober and they realize they have to vote, they see the next 4 or 5 months play out and they see Donald Trump debate him. This is going to be a massive landslide. But I don't think it's going to be that easy. I just do not believe that this is going to be an election that is not contested. I think no matter what happens, it will be contested. And I'll leave you with this. How much time we got there, Tanner?
We're about 48 minutes in.
Okay, we'll give a few more minutes here. The last thing I'll say is that if Joe Biden wins this election, I guarantee you that every single solitary person that voted for Donald Trump will think it was stolen. In the transition of power between the November election and January 20th will be a civil war of sorts. I don't know if it'll get physical, violent, or if it'll just be ideological and through the press, but there is going to be a war in that scenario because nobody's going to buy it. Nobody's going to believe that people went out and voted and got excited to vote for Joe Biden. It's just not going to happen. So like I said, the only way to get around it, in my humble opinion, is for the American people to peacefully protest. The silent majority has to get out of their living room, get back on whatever form of communication they have with their friends and family and say, I am really worried about where this thing is headed. And if I have to march on Washington, if I have to be loud, if I have to give my opinion and take the consequences, it's time to start thinking in those terms. You can't sit back and just let the world take you over. Because there's no doubt when you look around with what's going on and all the schemes and concoctions that have been put before the American people over the last 3.5 years, there's no way that your mind goes in any other direction other than we are in big trouble. Something big is at play. Something big is at play. So that's it for me today. Tanner, anything else? Anything else I forgot?
I think that's it.
Have a great day, everyone. Episode 3 in the books. I hope you'll listen to this commercial. It's on video. I don't know what the link is. I'll pop it up on Facebook. But this link is the most recent commercial. It's been all sent through Messenger. You very rarely see it on Facebook. It just goes kind of underground. But it's the underground message that I believe is aligned with the Trump campaign. And the voice, just FYI, before we start, the voice over on this particular commercial or this particular piece of propaganda is the same voiceover that does the Q commercials. So Q does his own commercials, The Great Awakening. They do all of this advertising and I don't know what it is. They're basically commercials for what's going on in the world. It's the Q point of view. I think it's obviously aligned with the Trump campaign. I think you should take a listen to it and get a sense of it. Have a great day, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.
Stop what you're doing. I'm about to show you something you already suspect deep inside, but can't explain. The United States of America is currently in the midst of a war. Not the kind when one country attacks another with missiles or tanks. Not like warplanes dropping bombs on our Pacific Fleet. Not like a hostile neighbor launching a surprise invasion across our borders. Instead, we face a cruel and merciless enemy who invented a whole new type of war, one that threatens us now more than all the bombs in the world. They are motivated by pure greed and inconceivable cruelty, and have been silently reversing all that is good for so long that we became lulled into a state of self-destructive compliance, while they tore us apart and robbed us blind. When patriots took back key branches of the U.S. government in 2016, a light was turned on to the vast corruption network that had infiltrated into the highest positions of power across every state. Only then did ordinary citizens begin to realize how close we had come to the end of it all. But first we must endure one last painful battle that will touch every citizen, no matter who they are. Right now, the country is being torn apart by the biggest political hoax and coordinated mass media disinformation campaign in living history. You may know it as COVID-19. Let me tell you a story. In 2015, as directed by the globalist criminal corruption network known as the Deep State, President Barack Obama authorized millions in funding for the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the location now understood to be the epicenter of the COVID-19 outbreak. The research carried out here was to provide the agent for a global biological attack on a scale never before seen, one that would be timed for release within an election year, starting the very day unsubstantiated efforts to impeach President Trump fell apart. With their base of operations in the Democrat establishment, the Deep State Shadow Corporation embarked on a coordinated irregular warfare insurgency with multiple aims, all under the cover of a global pandemic they themselves manufactured for this purpose. Enabled by their owned and controlled corporate media monopoly, they instigated a heavy-handed and unjustifiable nationwide shutdown to reverse Trump's many economic and unemployment gains, with Democrat-controlled states suffering the harshest restrictions in the country. Trump's energetic rallies were halted, hiding from view the surging nationwide passion for his galvanizing message, while Democratic presidential frontrunner Joe Biden was able to avoid interviews and debates where left-leaning voters would not be shown his obvious inability to govern, or the emerging Ukrainian bribery scandal that earned his family millions in illicit kickbacks by abusing his office. The next major advantage of the pandemic for the deep state was the case made to the public for mail-in voting, a highly insecure practice proven to be rampant with fraud, just as the public saw in one such example when a former Philadelphia judge pled guilty to stuffing ballot boxes after being paid by what he called a Democrat political consultant. With a rapidly rising death toll needed to make the case to the public for even harsher control, normal influenza deaths for the year were recorded as COVID-19, artificially inflating the numbers. But this was only the beginning. When this did not yield enough fatalities, the deep state initiated a murderous plan to defy federal guidelines and to move infected patients into nursing homes where the highest risk age group could be found in large numbers. The deep state governors of New York, New Jersey, California, Pennsylvania, and Michigan oversaw what can only be described as a genocide of our elderly loved ones, even as the quickly constructed field hospitals and medically equipped Navy ships stood mostly empty. This horrendous act cost the lives of over 50,000 people, but gave the insurgency a death toll that would stoke the public fear needed to push ahead with their goals. In these dark times, when people had little else but the comfort of community in their faith, this too was forcibly halted when simply going to church was banned across the country under the guise of public safety. Depression and loneliness became the new epidemic, all designed to create the social conditions needed for what was to come next in their despotic plan to fracture the nation and hold on to power. Immediately upon reports of a flattening curve and a reduction in new cases, the mysterious murder of George Floyd hit the headlines. What was presented to the public as a routine instance of racially motivated police brutality turned out to be a strange and coincidental series of events involving two men who once knew each other, working security in a nightclub. This event provided the justification for the next chapter in their coordinated insurgency against the United States. The goal was to inflame civil unrest along racial lines on an emotional platform of social justice. A divided house cannot stand, and the enemy knew this all too well. Black Lives Matter was funded and designed by the corrupt Democrat establishment as a social weapon to draw crowds of well-meaning protesters into harm's way, using them as human shields while they pushed a savage insurrection on city streets. This was intensified even further by folding in the violent paramilitary group Antifa, who were given a free pass by Democrat mayors and governors to loot stores, smash up small businesses, and assault innocent bystanders. The public were shown in explicit detail how Democrat leaders refused to protect local citizens, choosing instead to provide an open road for the anarchists to destabilize civil society, allowing the innocent to be indiscriminately injured and terrorized. Knowing that lawless chaos would accelerate their aims, they began calling for the elimination of police, while evicting the National Guard, who were made available to protect the public against the worst of the violence. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser even called for the elimination of the White House fence, just days after a close call by rioters who attempted to breach the perimeter. And on June 22nd, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff proposed a House bill to amend United States Code Title 18 that would prohibit the use of military force in the event of civil unrest, an obvious attempt to weaken the Commander-in-Chief's ability to defend the public from the planned insurrection, which was intended to play out over the weeks and months leading up to the election.
Attorney General William Barr has appointed the U.S. Attorney in Connecticut to investigate.
The pandemic was also providing cover of a different kind. Taking place behind the scenes at the Justice Department is a far-reaching investigation into the Obama administration's weaponization of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to spy on Trump and his associates during the transition of power. With evidence now emerging that Obama officials, including Joe Biden and Obama himself, colluded to frame General Michael Flynn. They used social distancing guidelines to hold grand juries and give witnesses the cover of health fears to avoid honoring court-ordered subpoenas. What you are witnessing is the dying breaths of a hidden enemy responsible for over a century of embedded corruption that has been slowly destroying our republic from the inside. They divided us along racial, gender, and political lines. They created reasons for us to go to war. They made international trade agreements that brought us no benefit, but allowed them to steal our vast wealth, driving us into a state of perpetual economic decay. They flooded our streets with deadly drugs to manufacture a devastating epidemic of addiction and mass incarceration. And they did it all with impunity while their completely controlled mainstream media assets kept us distracted and focused on everything else except our one true enemy. The 2020 U.S. elections are like none we have ever experienced. COVID-19 is being sold as a natural event, but we see now it is an attempt by enemies of humanity to hold on to power. After November, they stand to lose it all. But they will do everything to keep the crisis alive and the people in fear. To win, we must remember what made us strong, so that true justice can finally return to what is, and always will be, the most exceptional republic ever to exist in all of human history. May God bless America.